please explain why representation matters?
Representation matters.
I think that's why representation matters so much.
Representation is something that really matters to me.
I've learned why representation matters so much.
See, representation matters.
Or just through the power of representation, being able to see yourself on screen.
Representation.
Representation.
Women's stories matter.
Yeah. Right.
They just matter.
In 1940, Hattie McDaniel made history by becoming the first Black person to ever be nominated and win an Oscar at the 12th Academy Awards. Hattie won the Oscar for Best Actress in a Supporting Role for her portrayal of Mammy in the 1939 smash hit movie Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind was a monumental achievement in filmmaking history, and for many years was the highest grossing movie of all time, and McDaniel's portrayal of the Mammy character became a popular stereotypical Black caricature for the depiction of subservient slaves. The film premiered in Atlanta, Georgia at the Lowe's Grand Theater. The mayor declared that day a citywide holiday, and a crowd of about 18,000 people gathered at the theater. However, despite her major contributions to the success of the film, Hattie McDaniel was not allowed to attend the premiere of the movie due to segregation laws at the time. She was, however, granted special permission to attend the Oscar ceremony at a segregated hotel in California, where she was not allowed to sit with her co-stars, but instead at a table set against a far wall. That night, Hattie became the only Black woman to ever be awarded an Oscar for acting, a record she would hold for another 50 years. Conversations around representation in media are ever present. It feels like every couple years or so, there's a renewed re-examining of the Hollywood system and how that system has excluded various marginalized groups from having their stories told. Through every facet of entertainment, whether that be film, TV, music, fashion, art, it seemed that only one type of image, one type of story was allowed to be told. So in response to that, there have always been calls for inclusivity, for marginalized groups to be represented in the media they consumed. And the phrase representation matters quickly caught on as a sort of battle cry for that push for inclusivity. And Hollywood listened, for the most part. To varying degrees across different industries, there were some attempts to allow marginalized groups a seat at the table, to finally have their stories told and hopefully be respected and acknowledged to the same degree as their white counterparts. But despite all the progressive changes that have been made over several decades, it always seemed like we still had so far to go. It never felt quite enough. There have always been moments in Hollywood history where the biases and lack of inclusivity were spotlighted, and it felt like a never-ending conversation around how to make the industry better. And it started making me think about how so many of the conversations we're having right now about how important representation is not new. And if after over 100 years, Hollywood is still struggling to effectively implement changes that allow marginalized groups to be represented in a meaningful way, maybe we need to re-examine just how meaningful that kind of representation was in the first place. Maybe we've placed too much significance on representation. And I worry that our obsession with representation, our preoccupation with seeing our stories, bodies, and lives reflected in the media we consume have made us increasingly less critical and may actually be causing us harm. Now, I want to make a disclaimer because the idea of foregoing representation is a very popular right-wing talking point, and it's normally a very disingenuous conversation, usually made by people who are just angry that there are more Black people or women in their favorite TV shows or movies. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm not trying to altercate whether or not The Little Mermaid should be Black. Get over it. But I did want to have a conversation about the way we pedestalize representation as this all-important rectifier to the Hollywood inclusivity issue, which I don't think it is. I think we put too much on representation, and it has kind of distracted us from the very real issues that are happening. So while yes, I do think it is very important to see yourself in the media we consume and how powerful that is and what it can do in our everyday lives, I also want to highlight what it's not doing. So that's the conversation we're having today. Back in the 19th and 20th century, during slavery and segregation, Black people were not allowed to attend the same schools, frequent the same businesses, or even use the same bathrooms as white people, let alone work with them on entertainment. Because of this, productions that wanted to have Black characters in their plays or films would use white actors painted Black instead. These portrayals relied heavily on harmful Black stereotypes and ushered in the emergence of minstrel shows that were a form of entertainment dedicated to mocking black people put on for a white audience. But I also want to highlight that it wasn't unheard of for actual black actors to also take part in minstrel shows. Hattie McDaniel, for example, got her start on minstrel shows. But even as the popularity of minstrel shows died down and segregation laws relaxed, films oftentimes still opted to use white actors to portray people of color. Again, often relying on harmful stereotypes in order to depict those characters. And the rare cases where performers of color were allowed to work on major films, their roles were very limited. So in order to have a diversity of stories to be told, stories that accurately depicted their history, marginalized groups funded and produced their own films, though they were still never held to the same standard of acclaim as their white counterparts. And honestly, that kind of segregation in media persisted for a while. Films that were made by Asian people were thought to only be for Asian people, and films made by black people were thought to be only for black people. And nowadays, when there are considerations about what types of movies to make, the decision oftentimes comes down to whether or not a film can appeal to all four quadrants. The four quadrants refers to the demography of moviegoers: male under 25, male over 25, female under 25, and female over 25. A movie that appeals to all four quadrants is referred to as a tentpole film. And ordinarily, a movie needs to appeal to at least two quadrants before it can be expected to be successful. The more quadrants a movie appeals to, the more money it will probably make. And now more than ever, studios are very selective with the types of movies they greenlight, and are less likely to take chances on films that don't have broad appeal or appeal to the most common denominator. That's the reason why a movie like Joker or Deadpool making $1 billion at the box office is so significant, because on paper, an R-rated film would already lose out a significant number of potential moviegoers. But in the past, even when a movie didn't perform well at the box office, there were still avenues for a film to recoup its cost. When movie on demand exploded, it became a very lucrative secondary market for films to make more money. You could either buy or rent a cassette tape of a film you wanted to see long after it had been out of theaters. Then it became DVDs and Blu-ray, but that market was essentially wiped out with streaming. People weren't buying DVDs anymore, and because pretty much every major studio now has their own streaming platform, there's not a lot of avenues for an individual film to make more money if it didn't perform well at the box office. And going to watch that film on a streaming service doesn't necessarily contribute to the revenue of that film. Even if someone signs up to a streaming service to watch a specific movie, it's difficult to determine if that movie was the reason they decided to sign up for the service, and whether to attribute that subscription charge as revenue for that movie. Did Jake from Pennsylvania sign up for Max to watch Joker 2, or did he just decide to watch it after it was suggested after Beetlejuice? Who knows? So that made studios less likely to take risks on films they weren't confident would make money at the box office. After all, making a movie is an investment, and they're hoping to at the very least break even on the cost of what it took to produce and market the films. It's the reason why there are so many remakes, reboots, and sequels being made right now, because if you have a property that is already very loved, you can kind of assume that a lot of people are going to opt into watching it. Incredibles 3, and Frozen 3, and Moana 2, and Zootopia 2, and Toy Story 5. That also meant, in addition to less low budget and middle budget films being made, stories that were seen as niche or group specific were considered to not be able to make a lot of money, which put films made by creators in the marginalized groups in a difficult spot. So we've already talked about how a lack of representation can lead to harmful stereotypical depictions of marginalized groups that can sometimes manifest in the real world. However, the case against representation in media oftentimes boils down to money. The idea is that if a movie is too specific in who it's trying to appeal to, foregoing the four quadrants, then it won't perform well at the box office. But that's actually not the case. In fact, it seems that there is a financial incentive to make movies more inclusive. A study conducted by UCLA found that franchise movies with a diverse cast of over 50% people of color were some of the highest earning movies in 2023. Movies such as Creed 3, Scream 4, and John Wick 4 all had a diverse cast and made a lot of money. When the film industry gives them what they want, people of color deliver at the box office year in and year out. So the go woke, go broke rhetoric never really had any legs to stand on. That phrasing came out as retaliation against all the inclusivity and diversity that was happening in the media, as a kind of threat to companies that tried to be more inclusive. However, studies have shown that brands actually make more money the more inclusive they are in their advertising. In a global study conducted by Unstereotype Alliance, it was found that across 392 brands, that use inclusive advertising tactics experienced 3.5% boost in short-term sales and a 16% increase in long-term sales. So for so long, the justification for why there couldn't be more inclusive films made by a diverse array of creators was that it simply would not be profitable. But that's not true. In that same UCLA study, they found that half or more of the top 10 films made for diverse audiences also made it to the #1 spot on the domestic box office. Diversity sells here and overseas. It's the opposite of the conventional myth. The least diverse films performed the worst, and even posed a negative return on the studio's investment. There's also this idea that movies that are made for a specific demography won't have widespread appeal, but that's also not true. Crazy Rich Asians, for example, had an audience breakdown of 38% Asian Americans going to see it, but 41% of audiences that went to see the movie were white. So the movie being made by Asian Americans with a predominantly Asian cast did not deter white audiences or other demographics from seeing the film. And then there was Barbie, a huge blockbuster hit, a woman-centered film directed by a woman making $1 billion at the box office. So diverse movies make money and provide opportunities for really talented people in marginalized groups a chance at realizing their dreams. So why am I not so sold on representation? The issue that I have with the way we pedestalize representation is that it's often presented as this great equalizer, that by simply having more diverse bodies and stories on screen, those marginalized groups will greatly benefit and have the tools to resist the systems of their oppression. But that's not the case. Despite all the advancements we've made and all the conversations we've had about the importance of representation, marginalized groups and identities still struggle to be recognized and treated fairly, even in their own industry. Whenever a major achievement happens within the industry, like Halle Berry becoming the first Black woman to win the Oscar for Best Lead Actress, or Michelle Yeoh becoming the first Asian actress to win that award, or Barbie making $1 billion at the box office, we're expected to look at that and believe that that signals a sweeping change and this big ushering of inclusivity and acceptance and change, when in reality, those specific outliers actually highlights just how deeply flawed those systems are. I don't look at Barbie being the first woman-directed film to make $1 billion and think, wow, women are finally being taken seriously in the industry. I look at that and wonder why there haven't been more opportunities for women directors to make more movies like that, and how it's probably going to be a while before another woman is able to replicate that success. Right? Because one person's individual accomplishment does not trickle down to other people within that group. And in the case of Barbie being a woman-centered film directed by a woman, it didn't really get a lot of industry support. In fact, all of the conversations coming out of the Barbie movie were mostly centered on Ryan Gosling's portrayal of Ken, pretty much the only significant male role in the entire film. The I'm Just Ken song was being nominated at award shows along with Billie Eilish's What Was I Made For? And it won one of those awards.
I'm just Ken, Barbie!
I'm Just Ken beat out What Was I Made For at the Critics' Choice Awards, and there was actually a lot of worry going into the Oscar that it might win there as well. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Greta Gerwig didn't get nominated at the Oscars for directing that movie. So even in the midst of what should have been this huge triumph for women in film, we were still recognizing how exclusionary that system is. In 2016, the Oscars again faced a severe backlash when not a single person of color was nominated for any of the acting roles. The backlash coined the phrase Oscar So White, created by April Reign. In response, several actors of color boycotted the Oscars, including Will Smith, and in response to this, the Academy made sweeping changes to diversify its membership to include more underrepresented minorities. Now, people might see that as a good thing. They're taking steps towards addressing the issue. But for me, for the Oscars to at that point overlooked people of color in 2015, despite decades of representation, it indicates that the system was working as it was always intended. People would look at that as a failure of the system, but no, the system was created in its inception to keep those people out. It's working as it should. But when we're presented with historical achievements like Michelle Yeoh, like Halle Berry, like Hattie McDaniels, we're expected to celebrate the fact that because those people were able to squeeze their way through the door, that means that the system has fundamentally changed. But those individual successes are simply an exception to a very long-standing rule. It does not signal a sweeping change in the marginalized groups they come from, and actually, oftentimes, it doesn't even represent a change in those performers' lives. Award shows like the Oscars, Emmys, and Grammys are significant because being awarded is supposed to mean more work and opportunities in the future. A recognition by that industry that this performer is exceptional. But winning an Oscar as a white person does not mean the same as winning an Oscar as a black person. So many actors of color talk about their struggle finding work after ascending to the summit of their industry. Octavia Spencer opened up about not getting a lot of calls to work on film after winning the Oscar for her performance in The Help. Hattie McDaniel was the first black woman to ever win an Oscar. Another black woman did not win an Oscar for another 50 years, 5 whole decades. Michelle Yeoh made history by becoming the first Asian woman to win the Oscar for Best Lead Actress. How many more years do you think it's gonna be before another Asian actress wins that award? Sheryl Lee Ralph was only the second black woman to win an Emmy for Best Supporting Comedic Actress. Is it because there hasn't been any funny black women in TV in the past decades? And it's not just film and TV, even in music. Beyoncé has the most Grammys of any artist ever, been nominated more than any other artist. And she still has never won their most prestigious award, Album of the Year. What does it say about the Grammys as an institution that the person who has won most of their awards is a black woman, and that black woman has still never won their most prestigious award? Or the fact that no black woman has won that award in over 20 years. Does it mean no black woman has made an album worthy of that distinction? I don't think so. Whenever these exceptions to the rules happen, we're expected to think that that signals a meaningful change happening, that these systems and structures are finally being changed in a significant way, when in reality, they're simply continuing to do what they've always been designed to do. Keep those people out. It was important to me to start off this video with the story of Hattie McDaniel. She's a very interesting figure to me because she's simultaneously a very controversial figure while also being a very revolutionary figure. She, on one hand, accepted roles that fed into harmful stereotypes of black people while also breaking down boundaries for black performers. And her story is a very sad one. After winning her Oscar, she also struggled to find work. And in the work that she could find, she oftentimes was just playing the same character over and over again, the subservient mammy. She wasn't allowed to be anything else. 74 out of 97 of her IMDb entries are of her playing a character that's a maid, someone subservient to the white class. And when she passed away, one of her dying wish was to be buried at the Hollywood Cemetery, a place where a lot of famous Hollywood actors are buried. But the cemetery was segregated at the time, and so she could not be buried there. Even her Oscar, which was donated to Howard University, was appraised and valued to be worthless and has since gone missing. This black woman rose to the pinnacle of her industry, becoming not only the first black person and black woman to be awarded an Oscar, but also the first person of color, period. And for that monumental accomplishment, she was not shielded from the discrimination and harassment of her race. Her individual success did not matriculate into more protection and respect for other black people. It didn't even manifest into more protection and respect for herself. And look, I don't necessarily want to put all of that responsibility on her. I sympathize with her so much. You know, sometimes I feel like we have a bad case of presentism where we try to apply very modern 2025 sensibilities to historical issues. And though I may take issue with the way that she navigated her career by taking on roles that perpetuated negative stereotypes of black people, I can also recognize that there is something to be said about a black woman born to formerly enslaved parents and having this dream of wanting to be a performer and wanting to be an entertainer and feeling like there was only one real way to get there and being pigeonholed to showing up a specific way. I sympathize with that. So yeah, representation matters. It is extremely powerful to see yourselves reflected in the media you consume. So many of our favorite artists and entertainers talk about the fact that if they had not seen someone like them in the media doing what they've always dreamt of doing, they would have never felt it possible for themselves. So representation does matter, but it's not enough. We deserve more than representation. We deserve protection. We deserve equity. We deserve respect. We deserve love. We deserve grace. We deserve more.
For your kindness, it has made me feel very, very humble. And I shall always hold it as a beacon for anything that I may be able to do in the future. I sincerely hope I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry. My heart is too full to tell you just how I feel. And may I say thank you, and God bless you.
So, yeah, those are my thoughts on this issue. This is a video that I've kind of always wanted to make, but I was trying to figure out a way of how to really broach the topic without trying to dismiss the importance of images and how we see ourselves and how much of our self-value can be wrapped up in the media we consume, because that is very significant. But I just don't want us to make it the most important things. There still needs to be real life legislative changes that happen to make our lives better. Just seeing yourselves in the movies and TV shows you consume won't necessarily make your lives better on an individual level. So let me know what your thoughts are about this below. I'd like to hear, what thoughts you guys have. I also just wanted to say that I'm trying to take the channel in a new direction. I've been toying around with some stuff and playing around with stuff. So this is actually like a new medium of doing a video like this. So yeah, I'm really optimistic for 2025. Oh, also, if you've made it this far to the video, subscribe to the channel. 94% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed, and I think that's crazy. Like, why wouldn't you subscribe? It's so fun. So if you're watching this video, there's a 1 in 94 chance that you're not subscribed to the channel. So just hit the subscribe button, be a part of the family. It's fun. Be sure to like the video. Let me know what your thoughts are below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.